Fear versus logic. The Republicans, conservatives are masters of using fear. Be afraid, right? Back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they were telling white people, be afraid of black people, they want your jobs. Or be afraid of black men, they're going to rape your women. Or be afraid of, fill in the blanks. It's all this be afraid, be afraid. And then, and now the current one is, oh my God, it's Ebola. And Republican legislators are saying, oh, it's Africa, right? Like there's no racial subtext to that. It's Africa. We got to worry about Africa. West Africa, travel bans. Now just think about this for a minute. Right now, because there's no travel ban on travel out of Liberia and Sierra Leone and Guinea, because there are no travel bans, when people leave those countries and arrive here, we know who they are. They get their passports stamped. They don't use subterfuge. They don't go through second or third countries. They don't play the kind of games that you play. I used to know back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s when I was doing international relief work with Salem International, and we helped set up programs for abused kids in Israel, and we were looking at some of the Arab countries. We spent a fair amount of time in Egypt, ended up not setting anything up there. The program in Israel has a substantial component for Arab kids as well as Jewish kids, for Muslim kids. And I remember flying from Jerusalem into Cairo the week that Anwar Sadat was shot on Nefertiti Airlines, an airline that had no markings. In the airport, they had the flight number and the time of departure, but no name of the city that it was going to, and no name, because Israel could not acknowledge that this was happening. This came out of Camp David. It must have been back in the 80s. I'd have to look back to, when was Anwar Sadat shot, because that was my mark for it. But I knew people who were doing business in both Egypt and Israel and other parts of the Middle East. And many of them had two passports. And in fact, for a while, well, I don't want to get into me, but what people would do is they would contact their passport agency and say, I lost my passport, I need a replacement. Get a replacement, and now you've got two passports. And when you go through Israel, you get the Israel stamp on your Israel on your passport. And when you go through Arab countries, you get the Arab country stamps. And I can tell you how consequential this is. I was in Uganda. I was in Kenya in 1980, I think it was, 79 or 80, waiting to get my visa to go into Uganda. And I had not been instructed by I later learned this local British guy who was in the New Stanley Hotel where I was staying, and we would sit down in the Thorn Tree Cafe and drink gin and tonics and have long conversations. He was this kind of the old British Raj, with the three-piece suit and the cane with the brass bird head on the top of it and the whole bit. And I couldn't figure out why every day I'd show up at the Ugandan embassy and every day they'd say, come back tomorrow. And all I wanted was the damn visa stamp, right? Every day they said, come back tomorrow. And so finally I decided, I'm going to take a week off while I'm waiting, and I'm going to go to Mogadishu. And so I booked a flight on Saudi Arabian Airlines, and they gave me a little sticker to put on my suitcase with my name. You get these stickers from the airlines, right? You put your name on it in case your bag gets lost. And I stuck it on the bottom of my briefcase and forgot about it. And the next day, this old British guy says, if you want to get your visa into Uganda, you got to bribe the guy. You got to, you pass him a 20 or a 50, I forget what it was, and you'll get your stamp. And it turns out that there was a lot of truth to that. I'm hoping the statute of limitations on that is long past. And so I got into Uganda, and I never went to Mogadishu, and I never flew on Saudi Arabian Airlines. Fast forward about 5 years. I'm flying into Israel with that briefcase. Years earlier, forgot that on the bottom of the briefcase is a Saudi Arabian Airlines sticker. I get to the airport, going through Israeli security. I'm in Tel Aviv, coming into the country. And the guy says, he's asking me questions. Who are you going to visit? What are you doing here? What's going on? And I'm giving him answers. And then he says, and when were you in Saudi Arabia? And I said, I've never been in Saudi Arabia. And he turns and he shouts, literally shouts at me, slams his hand down on my briefcase and shouts, liar! And I'm like, what? And he flips my briefcase over, and there's that Saudi Arabian Airlines sticker. And he says, what's that? And I said, well, I didn't even remember, actually. It took me a minute to remember that 3 years earlier, I had planned on taking this, 2-day trip to Mogadishu just for some sightseeing because I couldn't get my visa into Uganda. But they kept me there for 3 hours. They took everything apart. They took my toothpaste tube and stuck straws in it. Everything got x-rayed everything. It was incredible. And this is what happens in many of these Middle Eastern countries if you show up with stamps in your passport indicating that you've been in the countries that hate them, whether it's Israel or Saudi Arabia. In fact, many of the Middle Eastern countries won't let you in with an Israeli stamp. So
you're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So what happens if you put a travel ban on these Ebola countries is people will start getting around it, and then, just like they do like what I just described, and then you won't have track of them.